Mango's Book Club. I'm Jaina.
I'm Tara.
And today we will be talking about the books we read in January. So my rotten mangoes, I have two because I've decided to give it a two-way tie of my least favorite book of the month. But I have to preface this by saying I read really good books this month. So least favorite just means 3 stars basically, which I think is pretty good. So I'm not saying I hated the book or anything, just in comparison to the other books I read, they weren't as good. So the two-way tie is between A Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow by Laura Taylor Namey. This was lent to us by our friend, so shout out to Maria. And it is tied with The Girl He Used to Know by Tracy Gravis Graves. I mean, this is a really fun book. This is very young adult, which is great. But I think after having read a lot last year and not a lot in this genre, it was a little hard to get back into. The writing is just not as elevated. There's not as much nuance in it. I think one of my things about this book is there's a lot of build-up. It's like the whole book is build-up to an end. Comment on this book, I think with young adult, you have to read it in a day or 2 days. I think if it takes longer, you'll never finish it and you'll get annoyed with it.
Can you give us just like a basic summary of the book?
Basic summary of the book. A Cuban girl from Miami, her name is Lila, I believe. She has all of this stuff happen to her at the end of high school. And so her family's like, you need to chill and relax and become yourself again. So they send her to England for the summer to live with her aunt. And she meets this boy, I don't know how to say his name, Orion, I would say. Orion. Actually, it's Orion, because he's named after a constellation. So then this is paired with The Girl He Used to Know. This was a book I rented on a whim from Libby and just sort of, again, read it all in one day. I read it through the night and then finished it the next day. It was a good book. It's another one that sort of centers around a love story. The main character is a little awkward. Anyway, she has this relationship sort of for the first time with this guy who really understands her. And then there's like a separation, they meet up again, and ooh. I will say the ending is what knocked it down for me. The ending was a little too perfect.
I'm sorry, Jaina, but this,
I gave this book to her for her birthday.
Is gonna be the rottenest mango of the month. Basically, the plot of this book is, this is about a 35 or something year old woman. And it looks like a memoir because like a real human is on the front, but it's fiction.
It's a novel.
This is what the author looks like. Oh, another thing that takes place in London. Her life is sort of falling apart. I don't know if I want to reveal, but she had something sort of tragic that happened to her and her boyfriend, leading them to break up. The cool part about it is it's written in a bunch of sort of different formats, like texts and emails, you know? So you're like, haha, I relate, I guess. She can't let go of like trying to create this online presence and the people that she admires online that like are barely even real because she doesn't even know them. You're in her head and she's just like saying all these things like, I need people to love me, like I need people to love me in my absence, whatever.
That is so relatable though.
Yeah, it is relatable, but it's not pleasant to read about
because you're already thinking it in your head.
You're already thinking that in your head. Part of the joy of reading is sort of getting away from that, but this just puts you right back in. There is some great word choice in this book. Rots the crops. That curdles the milk. Premium person, like Delaware Street. Jaina, you're so premium.
My next book, going from least favorite to favorite, is Dope Sick by Beth Macy. Now, we're getting into books that were still really good. I loved Dope Sick because I learned a lot about the opioid epidemic. Specifically, I learned a lot about medically assisted treatment.
You define medically assisted treatment for me and the other people that don't know.
Yeah, so I'm not going to be great at defining this because the only introduction I really have from this is that book, so take this with a grain of salt. But basically it means, so for people who are addicted to opioids, when they are attempting to go into recovery, they'll be given medicine that sort of targets that addiction. So it reduces some of the dope sickness that you experience when you go through withdrawal. So the goal is to provide their body with what they need because of their addiction so that they're not dealing with nausea, vomiting, all of that stuff that makes it really, really difficult to recover and to want to become abstinent or to want to reduce your use of opioids. And so some of the things that people think is, well, then doesn't that just feed into the addiction? But a lot of these medically assisted treatments, the goal is just to attack the addiction. So it doesn't allow patients to experience a high. It's not the same as shooting up heroin or something like that. So anyway, if you're interested in that, I totally recommend doing more research. I really want to look more into it. But that was the biggest positive of the book, is that I learned something new that was so interesting to me. Now, the reason that it was a little just okay, in my opinion, was because Beth Macy introduces so many people throughout the book. You're following so many different stories, so many different perspectives, and you get lost in it.
Alright, so my next one, that was about to be the Rottenest Mango, but then this decided to beat it out, is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or Cuckoos. I don't know. So I'm not gonna say the name anymore. This is it. This is a book written in the 1960s, if you've not heard of it. This was a weird book. It's about three weirds. So it's about all these quote-unquote crazy people living in this ward together. There's this nurse, and she sort of wants to control everybody's mind. But so then this guy comes in, Mick Murphy, and he's like, I'm gonna blow up this whole place. We're getting the nurse out of here. Basically, why I didn't like this book is, again, because it's a little hard to read because it centers around like a castration complex. Maybe for history's sake, read this book. Have a critical eye about it. You don't have to take everything it says. Like, really analyze what it's telling you, because some of this stuff is really messed up.
Okay, my next book is Blowout by Rachel Maddow. This was a really good book. It sort of reminded me of Catch and Kill a little bit. I told Tara that. So I think one thing that Rachel Maddow is really talented at doing, which is similar to what Ronan Farrow did well in Catch and Kill, is telling a story. And in this book, Rachel Maddow is talking about Russia and the oil industry and natural gas, but she does it in a way that's interesting, because those topics on the surface can sound kind of boring, at least they do to me. She writes it for people who have no idea, you know what I mean? Like, you can go into this book knowing nothing about oil, knowing nothing about Russia, and you'll be able to follow along. You learn about the oil industry, how it's totally devastating the environment, how these people work around government regulations, how there's so much corruption. And then same with Russia. I mean, this book really scares me in terms of the politics of Russia, because I know it's bleak, but then I read these specific anecdotes and it's just mind-boggling, like the way that deals are made.
So the next one is A Very Punchable Face by Colin Jost. Looking at this book, you're like, why did he write this? He's only like 30-something. I like reading stuff that comedians have written. You know, I'm not laughing the whole time, but some things do actually make you laugh. For me, it's mostly the stories in here. He's just a goofy, sort of stupid guy, but smart
and
also.
He's freaking dating Scarlett Johansson.
I know! It just doesn't make sense. He goes to Harvard. You know, he worked hard to get on the Harvard Lampoon, but he gets in, and then he works some little job for a couple months, and then like, bam, he works as an...
I'm like looking at it, and I feel like he's looking at me.
I really like this color. I want to paint my room this color.
Yeah, it's
so
really
pretty.
nice.
And like the feel of this book, I feel like.
This is my runner-up to the Ripest Mango. Another gift from Tara, One Life by Megan Rapinoe. I freaking love her. And that's my moral of the story with this book. You don't read this book because of the writing, obviously. And I just think she's an incredible person. I think she's very brave. Obviously, she's a white woman, and she acknowledges the privilege that comes with that. And I don't feel that she's one of those white women who try to tell other people how to be progressive or how to be an activist. She's just sort of like, listen, I had a political awakening, and now I'm involved. And that's what everybody needs to do. Have your political awakening and do something about it. In this book, she talks about coming out as a gay player, being one of the first players on the U.S. women's national team who was openly gay, and she always talks about there were a ton of gay people on the team at every point, so it didn't make sense that she was always sort of the first. So the book talks about race, and I just can't emphasize enough how well she balances talking about this stuff, because she doesn't try to be a know-it-all. It was really good. I love Megan Rapinoe, period.
Okay, so my next one is
this your ripest?
No,
okay.
I have one more that I don't have.
Oh my gosh.
Oh no, I have two more, actually.
I do too. I lied. One Life was not my runner-up.
Maid. Hard work, low pay, and a mother's will to survive. Oh man. What a statement. It's a lot about her experience sort of living in poverty, then having to later on work as a maid. This was the work available to her, so she just had to do it. She can share her story now because she doesn't have to work as a maid anymore. Because for her, she was able to go to community college, get a degree. But the interesting part about this is once you sort of get into when she was a maid, it isn't the entire book that she's a maid. She sort of talks about each house as a chapter that she had to clean and what it was like looking into those people's lives and being treated as this invisible person for a lot of them. Yeah, so a lot of wise stuff in here. Was it fine?
Yeah.
Was it real?
Yeah. So One Life is tied with another book I rented from the library, This Is How It Always Is by Laurie Frankel. So they're tied as my runner-up. And This Is How It Always Is by Laurie Frankel was a fantastic read. I really loved it. I'm pretty sure I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. Basically, it's a story of this family, these 2 parents raising a genderqueer child. And it's a family story. That's what it comes down to. It's about parents raising children, not just a genderqueer child, but I'm pretty sure there's 4 or 5 children in their family, in an imperfect society, in a society that's biased, that will be prejudiced against certain types of people. And how do you teach your children these lessons? How do you raise them so that they feel loved, but also so that they're not so sheltered from the world that once they're out on their own, they have to deal with these huge shocks of people learning who they are. It was another book where the writing itself just lifts it up so much, and you sort of see this journey of people growing up through their childhood and discovering who they are and having to deal with how the world perceives them. I think it's a great story. I think there's something for everyone to relate to, and I think you can walk away from it feeling like you learned lessons about life. Boom. We read too many books.
Much. Next one.
Is this your ripest?
No.
Oh my god, this video
is Beautiful Boy. Fantastic book. I think that we read a lot this month apparently about addiction.
Not a lot, that's 2 books.
How much are you reading about addiction? Tell us. If you don't know the plot of this book, it is from a father's perspective about his son, Nick, becoming addicted to methamphetamine and just like a whole array of drugs and alcohol. From his perspective, how does this happen to my child? What did I do? But I can't blame myself. Can I blame him? It got a 4 star, not a 5, because I sort of found it a little like, come on, stop telling me about the mountain.
You don't like books that are overwritten.
I don't like books that are overwritten. That was my only complaint about the book. Otherwise, it was really, really good. If you have family members that are dealing with anything, I think it sort of teaches you like, well, but what's my role in this? What's the best thing I can do to support them? I think the lesson that this guy ultimately learns in the book is I can't be the one to heal him. And gosh, that's so deep, but it's like so true.
David Sheff made mistakes in raising Nick, but Nick also made mistakes, and there's no point in trying to like pinpoint one moment where something went wrong. It was just, we live in a society where addiction is ubiquitous, and it was an unfortunate thing that happened, and you can only deal with the consequences. Cool. Now we are at my ripest mango, In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. I really enjoyed reading it. I think it's so well written. I think it's one of the best written books I've read, just in terms of how everything's laid out. And I'm sort of confused. You've heard my confusion about this. It's fiction, but also about a true story. So I think it's like a semi-fictionalized account of the murder of the Clutter family in Kansas. The book is just so amazing because in the beginning, you're introduced to the family before the murder, but then you're also introduced to the murderers, and you follow them through time, leading up to the murder and then after, and then you also learn about the investigators, since you're following these different characters in this event, and you get the whole story of all of them. And so it's just really fascinating. It's also scary. Like, it took me a little longer to read this book than it normally would to take me to read a book like this, because I couldn't read it before bed, because I just didn't want to go to sleep thinking about a murder of a family, like, in their home. You know what I mean?
Scary.
It's scary stuff.
Didn't get scared.
I get scared really easily. What I really love, too, is at the end, you get to read about the trial, and then imprisonment of the murderers, and eventually they're put on death row, and I don't want to spoil anything, but you're also given all the facts pretty much at the beginning of the book, so it's not really about finding out any information. It's about reading the story. Ripest Mango of January.
I gotta read that
Yeah,
one.
I think you should. I just think it's a really interesting story.
So my last Ripest Mango of the mangoes is Writers and Lovers. This is a fiction book. It's about this girl who's living in Boston. She works at a restaurant. She has been working on this book for years. Her love life is in shambles. So then eventually, after all this stuff, she sort of ends up in a relationship with this guy. But then there's sort of this other guy who
God, I'm getting lost.
she went to the writer's party she met that guy at the party for the guy she is now dating. I think it's a beautifully written book. It's perfect. It's such a perfect book. And then it ends beautifully. It's just like, oh, my heart is warm.
I need to read it.
It's so good. I just loved it so much. It was short. Oh my god, I loved it. It wasn't overwritten.
Okay, so those were the books we read in
Oh, you
January.
already said your Ripest Mango.
I said my Ripest Mango.
Shoot.
Look at this pile. So January was a good month of reading.
Yeah.
Check out some of these books. Let us know if you have any questions. Please subscribe, like,
Yeah.
comment, whatever. Turn on your little bell.
That's pretty much it right there. We got it all.
So we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.